the Green Bay Packers against the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas favored by 7.5. What's your take on this game?
Yeah, interesting one here. We got the McCarthy revenge game, I suppose, against Green Bay here. So this one's interesting for a bunch of different matchups. I think obviously the Joe Barry defense has been maligned for much of the second half of the season. I don't love the slot corners and safeties against CeeDee Lamb over the middle. But Terrence Steele has been the squeaky wheel on that Cowboys offensive line. I think our guy Tresh, someone at PFF, apologies, put out that he accounts for the highest percent of a team's pressures of any offensive lineman in the NFL. And that is, where Rashawn Gary is going to likely line up the most of his snaps is over Terrence Steele at right tackle. So that is interesting to me, but I just struggle to see the Packers stopping this Cowboys offense much at all. On the flip side, Jordan Love's been awesome, been a revelation. Against pressure is still his, and again, it sounds dumb saying this. Every quarterback, yes, struggles against pressure, but his splits are really, really big there. And Dallas, third in the NFL at getting home with only 4 rushers. I just think they're going to be able to get a lot of consistent pressure without blitzing and cause some problems for the Packers.
Yeah, I think the key to this game is whether Green Bay's offense can keep Dallas out of those clear, obvious pass rushing situations, because the Cowboys still have the best pass rush in the NFL. Micah Parsons is an all-pro edge rusher. The guy is arguably the defensive player of the year. He's absolutely outstanding. And even in games where he's been quiet, it's not been because he had a bad game. It's been because circumstances essentially took him out of the game. It's like watching Aaron Donald, right? Aaron Donald doesn't have bad games. Aaron Donald simply has games where outside circumstance prevent him from impacting them, right? But in those circumstances taking place, he is impacting the game, because either you have to call a bunch of stuff that means Aaron Donald can't get to the passer, or you have to assign like 3 guys to him on every single play. In either way, he is affecting the game, even if he's not statistically or individually directly impacting the quarterback. And I think that's Micah Parsons right now, is that he is affecting the game, whether or not he's putting up stats or whether or not he's actually in the quarterback's lap every single play. But Green Bay needs to be able to run the ball. Aaron Jones being back is a huge thing for them. Dude, he's so good when he's healthy. A.J. Dillon is a question mark heading into this game. Honestly, I don't know if that's a bad thing for Green Bay. Like, the more they lean on Aaron Jones, honestly, the better, I think, for that offense. And then, Jordan Love continuing the run that he's on. The weird thing about his splits, I said this on a Packers podcast with Andy Herman yesterday, or during the week anyway. He's like squeezed the Josh Allen career development arc into like a year. Like one season, 17 games he's gone from earlier in the year, it's like this is just college Jordan Love again. Like we've experienced no development on the bench, right? This is just the same guy from Utah State, which is wildly inconsistent, not accurate enough, all those kinds of things. And then it became inconsistent. Like we'd get games where he was on and there was something there and everyone started to like it. And that was like year 2 of Josh Allen, where it was still overall not great, but everyone was like, oh, this guy's, he's going to be it. Like, wait, it's going to click. And then the last 8 weeks or whatever, we've got year 3 Josh Allen, where he's just amazing. Like, Jordan Love has become one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL over the last several weeks of the season. I think from week 9 onwards, he's the 2nd graded quarterback in the league. He's barely put a foot wrong. His adjusted completion rate, his accuracy is shot through the roof. He's shown incredible pocket presence, poise, all these kinds of things, and understanding of the defense. Like, there are some plays where it looks like just a sort of heave and a hope or whatever, but you can see he's read out what's happening, and he knows that he has the ability to just like drop it into an ocean of space over here because a guy is one-on-one with a safety running against his leverage, that kind of thing. So that's part of this, right? Is I think Dallas is dealing with a different quarterback than they would have been earlier in the season. And if the Packers offense like doesn't let the game get away from them, I think they can definitely kind of keep this Dallas defense out of their comfort zone and away from the area where they make the biggest difference.
Yeah, and in particular on throws 20-plus yards downfield, the second half of the year is our 3rd highest graded quarterback, and that was a disaster the first half of the season. Yeah. You mentioned the actual accuracy charting on a throw-by-throw basis wasn't good either, and that all has flipped. And I do think part of that, in hindsight and retrospect, is, were there communication breakdowns with all of the rookie and second-year receivers? Were there elements that were kind of outside of his control, not fully vindicating him for everything? There were some throws where he was just simply inaccurate, but he's launching off his back foot, off weird platforms, weird arm angles. he had a couple absolute rifles in the Bears game, but then also had a bunch of, like you said, kind of touch passes to an area. The A.J. Dillon thing is a funny point. I mean, they average 7.2 yards per play against Chicago, which is like that's a I don't know 90th percentile yards per play outcome in a single game. It's very very good, and it was because Aaron Jones can just break off these big gains, check down stuff like that, but also in the run game. And then I mean, Jaden Reed's been a revelation for them too. He was awesome in that game. It's gonna be tough. I do just wonder if we see some of the happy feet and some of those things combined with a much better pass rush unit cause some problems.
The other side of the ball, they're also kind of strange because we had just reached the point where everyone was ready to fire Joe Barry, right? Defense has been terrible. It's capitulating the worst possible times as well. Like, we've seen enough. It's time to get rid of Joe Barry. And then he was like, oh, wow, if I don't pull out the good stuff, I'm going to get whacked. I better dial up all the good plays. And the last 2 weeks have been, I think, Green Bay defense's best performance of the season. Now, they've come against, not a good Minnesota Vikings offense with their quarterback situation, and the Chicago Bears, who are better, but still not exactly a top-tier group, right? It's a totally different ask expecting to do that against Dallas. But the fact that we have seen a dramatic jump in the level of that defense, because they were getting lit up by bad offenses as well. So there was a change. It's not like it was just running up against two offenses that weren't necessarily going to stretch them. They've been playing way better. Like, can they do that to a Dallas offense that at home has been scintillating?
I would have to look more at the splits, but the amount of twists and stunts and games they ran up front against Chicago in particular, it seemed like more than normal for that defense. And
Carl
they have a
Brooks.
ton of talent there. I think Devontae Wyatt really has come along. I feel like no one's really talking about him. Kind of a quiet first round pick last year, but has been really, really good for that. And then Lucas Van Ness, more of a cleanup guy, pursuit guy, but look, he plays the whistle on every single snap, and he will get guys chased into his lap. With the other talent they have. But that stuck out to me, and I think it could cause problems for Dallas. I think we'll get Tyler Smith back at left guard, but I mentioned Terrence Steele, Tyler Biadasz at center is solid but unspectacular. Like they have ways to attack this offensive line. I think that could be one key, is just throwing a lot of different looks at them and just confusing the offensive line a little bit.
Carl Brooks against Chicago had several plays where on those inside twists that you were talking about, he took out the entire interior of the offensive line by himself multiple times, and he did it from both sides of the line. Like, he basically took a charge straight at the A-gap between the guard and the center. The guard wasn't quick enough to get to him to stop his momentum. He just plowed right into the center, never saw it coming, and hit him so hard that the center took out the backside guard as well. So I think on both occasions, like, Kenny Clark was able to just come in around the back and was like, there's nobody here anymore. Like, all of the interior of the offensive line has just been taken out by Carl Brooks' initial first move. I do think, like, Tyler Smith has played at an all-pro kind of level at guard for Dallas, but he injured his, plantar fasciitis or whatever that's called. That's usually a bad injury for anybody, but for an offensive lineman that has to put hundreds of pounds of force through their foot every single snap, whether or not he plays, I don't know if you're getting all-pro caliber Tyler Smith back in the lineup. So at that point, you're saying, well, we might have a weakness inside because Tyler Smith might not be Tyler Smith. Tyler Biadasz is sort of the weaker point of the interior anyway. Okay, Zach Martin's really good, but he hasn't been like all-pro level Zach Martin that he usually has been this year. And then at right tackle, Terrence Steele is the biggest weakness, and Green Bay would be crazy if they didn't just line Rashawn Gary up on him every single snap. So you start painting that picture, and you're like, actually, this defensive front from Green Bay could cause some problems for that Dallas offensive line.
Yeah, and they refused to let Jair travel, which I think he's made his feelings about that well and understood and appreciated. But that is what concerns me. It's like we get some Keyshawn Nixon and various other players up the middle against CD. I think that's gonna cause some problems, no question about it. But yeah, no, you can't talk yourself into it. Carl Brooks is a good one to mention, a guy who graded off the charts in college, tested very, very poorly, but is clearly a good football player. It's interesting, but I also do wonder, though. I mean, Dallas' run game hasn't obviously been super efficient. Pollard has been a bit of a letdown, but this is a big game script game to me, too. Of course, they all are, but if Dallas comes out to an early lead, I think it gets even more difficult for Green Bay to kind of mount a comeback here. If they have control, I think they could kind of, make it
Yeah.
difficult for Dallas as well.
You're right. I think it really is. Like the start of this game is really important for either side. And then the other just X factor element in all this is, are you going to get amazing Dak Prescott or like bad Dak Prescott? And I don't know there's a pattern for when those show up other than simply to say they basically determine the outcome of the game. Like Dak Prescott has 5 games this season with a PFF game grade of 90 or better, including a 97, which I haven't checked, but that's one of the best grades we've ever given a player in a single game at quarterback. He's also got 3 games with a PFF grade under 50, including one of 39.4. And those games, we have the upset random loss against Arizona. We have the expected but also bad loss against San Francisco. And then we have the Buffalo game in week 15. Like, if you get bad Dak Prescott, and as I said, I don't know that there's a cause for that, but some days he just isn't there. If you get bad Dak Prescott, the Cowboys are in trouble. If they get good Dak Prescott, then I think, it's very difficult to stop this team because of everything they can bring to the table.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I guess it's hard to kind of break down how you get good or bad Dak Prescott
Right.
based on, but yeah, I mean, he's got to step up and play a good game. It helps that they're at home. They probably thought they were a wild card for the first 14 weeks of the year, and now you get to be in Jerry World. I guess the last piece I'll throw in too, and I know it's funny because Matt LaFleur is kind of infamous for, kicking a field goal against the Buccaneers, but we saw Matt LaFleur go for 2 down 8 and beat the New Orleans Saints this year. I think he's taken massive strides in game management. That could come up in a big, situation in this game. I think the coaching edge from a game management standpoint does go in Green Bay's way, and that could be interesting.
Matt LaFleur, I think, has a quietly very strong case for Coach of the Year that isn't being mentioned pretty much anywhere. I mean, the stuff that you mentioned, the fact that they did adapt the offense to suit Jordan Love as the season went on, and I think that happened in a couple of different ways. Number one, they got more aggressive and let him throw the ball down the field more. And number two, I think they realized that Jordan Love's actually capable of doing a lot more than they thought he was, sort of mentally within the offense, and actually opened the playbook up, like broadened the spectrum of what they were asking him to do. And I think both those two things are good coaching. And then again, the Packers were supposed to be bad this year. Like the fact that they're a playoff team in the first place, and every one of these young players, like the youngest roster in the league, and all of them on the offense anyway, look like they're good. Like all these receivers, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, like Christian Watson hasn't even been in the lineup recently and it hasn't mattered. Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave, like all these guys look like they're solid players. You have to look at that and say that's a pretty impressive job from Matt LaFleur, and instead, we're giving the award to Stefanski, to Harbaugh, to whoever, to DeMeco Ryans. I haven't seen many people mention LaFleur.
Good point. It's a good point. I mean, this is the youngest offense in playoff history, and then they had a kind of a down stretch. I think that's probably why they did obviously go through some hills and valleys throughout the year. But yeah, I mean, he should be talked about way more.
For all this talk that Dallas is unstoppable at home, they're crazy production at home, it's a different Dallas team, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like they've played like many good teams at home. Like, okay, they finally got the win against a quote unquote good team in Seattle, but that was that went down to the wire and they barely got over the line there. They beat Philadelphia at home. Philadelphia is collapsing right now. They might not even be good at all. And then they beat Detroit, and they just got over the line in that one as well. So, and, we're helped along the way, shall we say, with officiating. Now, they were also helped the other way with officiating. But anyway, there was controversy in that game, let's say. So I would argue that this might be the toughest test they have faced at home, given the current state of the Green Bay Packers.
Yeah, I know. The home road splits are always funny. I think maybe more so. I just think maybe there's signal in. They're playing in a dome. They obviously have a high flying offense, and it's not just like they're in Dallas versus the road. I think it's more that just crowd noise and all these various elements. They're not just become a magically better football team because they're in Texas.
Okay, so Dallas favored by 7.5. Steve is going with Green Bay to cover that spread and keep it within that number. Where are you going?
I'm with Steve on this one.
Same. I think we are universally agreed that this will be a tighter game than 7.5 points, even though Dallas are at home in Jerry World.